It is the peak of the season. Maybe you're getting leads coming in on the phones, but what about the issue of reservices? Do I have enough technicians? How do I triage these customers coming in? How do I handle my resources that are my people?
We forecast what the needs of the business are going to be on the service side, well, and on our CSR side, based on previous years' performance. We forecast that out and we say, okay, we anticipate that we're going to need this many technicians, this many CSRs, et cetera, et cetera.
But what if you overhire and you legitimately are overstaffed and none of those other things happen? What do I do with those people? If you have any questions or you have any concerns about staffing, reach out on the Facebook group.
Oh, totally.
We've got a whole community out there who wants to help you guys build and scale and grow. And a lot of these guys have been there before.
Yep.
Welcome to the Bug Bucks Podcast, a podcast designed to turn you into a bug money millionaire. This episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 training and education platform designed to help you build and scale your pest control company. I'm your host, Eric Bassett. Right next to me, we've got the other co-host, Jake Klaus. What's up, dude?
What's up, Eric and my fellow Bug Bucksers?
Not too much, man. I know that you've been champing at the bit to tell us about your new toy that was delivered this morning.
Oh, man, I got a new toy delivered this morning.
I actually, when they were loading it off, like unloading it off the truck, I was super jelly, dude. I was jealous.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us.
Okay, so let me preface it by saying this. So as a pest control guy for the past, 20 years or whatever, summer is the busiest time of year. And full disclosure, it has been, I think, probably 25 years since I've mowed a lawn. I don't do yard care because I just don't have the time in the summer, right? However, at our property, we've got a clover lawn planted, and then we just cleared a bunch of space down in our alder grove, and we planted a bunch of clover down there. So today, I had delivered a 40-inch deck, zero-turn John Deere mower.
Yes, dude.
I'm so stoked. I can't wait to put gas in it and go down there and mow the clover. I never thought I'd be that stoked to mow my lawn, but
That's how you know, what was it Jana was talking about when you're in your mid-30s, you're like, man, I just want to buy a motorcycle to ride on.
Yeah.
And then when you get in your mid-40s, you're like, I just want to buy a riding lawnmower.
oh yeah.
Like, that is so sweet.
Right? I mean, I feel like I'm just as pumped about this mower as I was to pick up my Honda 919 Hornet back in the day.
Dude, and I would say I'm a pretty big lawn dad, like a grass dad. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're out there with scissors.
Yeah, right? Just like I go out there and, put my hands on my hips and I'm like, like.
In your shorts that come up to like mid-thigh.
Yes, dude. Happy grass, happy life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's a real thing, a sense of accomplishment, and just so nice when you have like a good riding lawnmower.
Oh, absolutely.
You go out there, dude. Zero turn. It's gonna be great.
Zero turn. I'm excited about the zero
for you.
turn. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So back to pest control. Today we've got an awesome topic for you guys. We're gonna dive into, but before we go into that, just want to remind everybody listening, the best way to receive new episodes is by subscribing to our show on your preferred podcast platform like Apple, YouTube, Audible, or Spotify. If you love the show, please leave us a rating and a review. Make sure to check out our Facebook group, Bug Bucks Plus. That's BUGBUX Plus. We've got over 4,300 other pest control owners in that group. 4,300.
Dude.
Wild.
Man, we love you guys.
You guys are great.
Awesome.
Yeah, so.
Yeah. Don't hit subscribe. Don't forget.
Yeah, don't forget. Hit subscribe. And that Facebook group, of course, it's full of all these PCOs that are waiting to connect with you and share their thoughts. That's also the best way for you to share your feedback on our show and have your questions highlighted and discussed here on the podcast. So make sure you find us on Facebook and join the group. All right, dude. So today we're going to talk about some logistics for just a second.
Yep, let's do it. I like it.
So, it is the peak of the season, right? And if you're a pest control owner, maybe you're getting leads coming in on the phones. That's really great. But what about the always issue of reservices? Do I have enough technicians?
Yeah.
How do I triage these customers coming in? How do I handle my resources that are my people, right? And do I hire now, knowing that I need these additional technicians for the increase in initials and reservices? What the heck do I do with these guys come the slower part of the year? Right? So let's unpack this logistic debacle here for just a second.
Yeah.
And, maybe we should start with just the fact that how do we handle customers who are calling in upset about the increase in pest activity? What do we do about that in the first place?
Well, that's a great place to start because, I think, let's see, yesterday we interviewed Eric Anderson, and he said something that I think was really important. He said something about creating customer expectations. He said that he always explains to his customers, yeah, look, this is not a magic wand. You're going to see pests. And especially if you're a PCO in a market that has a lot of competition, maybe from door-to-door companies or otherwise, I think that one of the most important things is obviously creating the right expectations from the start.
Yes.
With your customers, because if you consider, let's say you get, let's just make it real simple. Let's say you get 100 ant reservices per month. Okay. And let's say that that 50% of those ant reservice customers are people that see a couple of ants in their kitchen, right? And so maybe somewhere along the process, either your office CSR or your sales guy, your door rep or whatever, said something along these lines. Quote, "And if you ever see anything in between your regular services, call us and we'll come back for free, period. Unlimited, period," end quotation, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, how many times have we heard that? So now let's apply that statement to these 100 customers that are seeing ants, and these 50 customers that are seeing a couple of ants. So with that basis of understanding, when they see a couple ants, what's in their mind? I see a couple ants. I need to call for a reservice,
yes.
Right? So in this case, I feel like you can get ahead of the triage in a way by setting the right customer expectations, and the conversation being, look, pest control is a process. It's not an event. It's likely that in the course of us treating your house for pests, you're going to see a few pests from time to time.
Yep.
And especially when it comes to ants, in this case, let's say they're odorous house ants, it's very common to see a handful of ants. In fact, we want to see a handful of ants. Yep. Because the only way that product is going to get back into the nest is through blah, 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 transfer, yada, 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 right? Sharing the bait, blah, blah, blah. So in that case, please do us a favor. Number one, don't squish those ants. And number two, please, for the love of all that is holy, don't spray Windex or cinnamon oil or whatever your mom...
Ortho Home Defense.
Or Ortho Home Defense or whatever magic elixir you heard from your Facebook girlfriends, right? Like, don't spray that on them. And number three, just leave them alone. Because we need those ants to come in contact with the product in the areas that we applied it in order to bring that back to the colony.
Yes.
So now, with that basis of understanding, and even if you send out, maybe you send out a quarterly newsletter or an email to your customers, if you reiterate that conversation and that expectation with customers over and over and over again, I believe that you can minimize the amount of reservice calls that you get in the first place. Because now, when Mrs. Johnson sees a couple of ants on her countertop, she's heard the conversation several times. Leave them alone. It's okay. Leave those ants alone because it's the process working.
Yes.
So if even 50% of your callbacks have that expectation, then all of a sudden you've gone from 100 callbacks in a month to 50. So customer expectations, I think, are key there.
100%. I mean, the customer communication aspect of this and being able to prevent these callbacks, right? And I guess we could even say that if you are not communicating clearly with your customers about these expectations, you are actually creating callbacks.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's not just about avoiding them. It's about not creating them in the first place.
Yep.
And we live in a time where Pest control is actually more popular when you can spin it in kind of the eco-friendly sense.
Oh, yeah,
right?
totally, yeah.
Whatever, go back 30, 40 years and it's like, we're going to kill those bugs dead, right? Like every single one of
Yeah,
them.
dude, remember when we started in the industry in California a decade and a half, almost 2 decades ago, and the conversation with the customer was, yeah, okay, well, we're going to come inside the house and we're going to spray. So what I need you to do is take all of the kids' toys. Do you remember having to tell customers this? Get all the kids'
I
toys.
need you guys to leave for 4 hours.
Yeah, put all the kids' toys in the middle of the room, put a heavy blanket over it,
Yeah.
and you got to be out of the house for 4 hours. So if you can go see a movie or get dinner.
I don't think so.
Can you imagine saying, and back then people were like, oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, the chemicals.
Sure, no problem, yeah.
got to do it to kill the bugs. And like nowadays, people are okay with having a more balanced approach, right? With products that naturally degrade in the environment that are designed to be pet environmentally friendly. And if you approach a customer and you say, hey, listen, we like to take a balanced approach, right? Which means that it's going to be pest control, not necessarily pest elimination. So while we're going to be controlling the influx of activity you usually see around the home, you might continue to see a pest here and there, right? Just know that it's a lot better now that you're controlling the issue than it would be if you weren't, right?
Yep.
And it's not just the callbacks that you're controlling there. It's also the perception of whether or not your service is working, right? Which not only drives the callbacks, but it also drives cancellations. Like you were saying before, you operate in a really heavy competitive market, and all of a sudden door-to-door guys are knocking on the door and they say, hey, I've been switching over all these people and, where are you seeing your ants at, right? And the customer's thinking, oh, well, yeah, I did see some ants and, it doesn't seem like it's really working, right?
Yeah.
And unless you've explained that process to them, they're going to assume that whatever this door-to-door guy is telling them is Bible, right? It's gospel.
Yep.
So just the communication process you're talking about, I mean, that's so huge. You're setting yourself up for success or failure by either communicating or not. And maybe kind of take it a step further for the guys who aren't just solo operators, is that you not only need to be communicating these to your customers, but the philosophy has to be top down through your whole team, right? So all the technicians, when you're in training, right? When you're doing role plays and meetings on a weekly basis, or however often you have them, I hope you're doing some kind of interaction at least weekly.
Sure.
And the other thing is going to be office staff, right? I mean, because if we think about it, if you're not a solo operator, you have an office person, they are the ones that are fielding these calls. So they have a unique opportunity when the customer calls in and says, hey, yeah, I noticed some spider activity. Your guy was just here, a few days ago, a week ago, right? And an untrained office person is going to go, oh, that's not a problem. Maybe get your address. We'll look at the schedule and get them right back out there, right?
Yeah.
And as an owner, you're thinking, no, like, what have you done, right? Because as soon as you go out and you set that expectation, you're just cementing the idea that if they see even a spider or two, that means we come back, right? And then the next time you have that conversation where you say, hey, listen, actually, that's a pretty standard thing. You might see an increase in activity after the service is performed, et cetera, the customer's like, I don't care. I want you to come out here now, right?
I feel like that's a minority of customers, though, that are unreasonable. I feel like, at least in
as long as you explain it to them, they're cool, man.
Yeah, most people are pretty reasonable if you give them good expectations.
Yeah, the expectation part, I mean, and I'm the same way as a consumer, right? I figure you probably are too. When I get somebody, if I buy a product or I have a service or whatever it is, if they explain the expectation to me, then I feel way better about it, right? I feel like as a consumer, I can operate within that realm much better. Because the last thing I want to do is be frustrated or confused about the product or service that I'm paying for, right? And again, luckily, it's a pretty popular thing now to have that balanced approach, right? Where you see a little bit of activity here and there, and you might see some spiders in the garden, which are fine, right? We're not going for the concrete jungle approach, kill everything in sight, kind of idea anymore.
Yeah, no, and you're always going to have those customers that don't care. Like you said, I don't care if you were just here 5 days ago. I want you here again. And you also said it's a top-down approach. And so I think that having a congruent narrative from the ownership to the CSRs to your service technicians is really, really important.
Yes.
And like you said, the way to do that is having regular communication with your team. You have this this consistent narrative. And then I think another big thing, and something that we have kind of done, is you use these. I don't want to say buzzword, because buzzword is a buzzword that I don't like using, but quote unquote buzzwords, right? That you allow to permeate the communication culture of your business.
Yes.
So a handful of those buzzwords or buzz phrases that we use and that we have disseminated into the vernacular of our entire company are some of these, right? So pest control is a process, not an event. So you take that buzzword and you apply it to literally any customer calling in. Well, I've got ants. No, we understand that. Pest control is a process, not an event.
Yep.
We don't have a magic wand. We're not spraying unicorn tears or leprechaun farts or whatever. Like it is a process, and it's science based.
Yep.
So that's one. Pest control is a process, not an event. Another buzzword that is really good, or buzz phrase, is more spray doesn't make the bugs more dead.
Yes.
Explain to your customer, and having your CSRs and your technicians be able to just confidently explain to people, look, these products have to be mixed at a certain concentration. That's why you hired us, because we're experts. That's another buzz phrase. That's why you hired us. We're experts at this. And the products have to be applied at a certain concentration. And when we apply the product at that concentration, it's the concentration that's been proven. There's the P word that you use with your customers. It's been proven to last for a period of time, to kill the bugs that encounter it in that period of time. So even though we've just sprayed, if we come back out and spray again, we're adding more product, and that's not going to make the bugs more dead, because we've already applied the correct percentage. And in our society today, in the world that we live in today, science is like, you trust the science or whatever, right? You can't argue against the science. And so when you use science to back up your claims, I think people, they don't want to seem dumb. So like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, oh yeah, the science, that makes sense. So I mean, you just incorporate these buzz phrases into the vernacular of your company, and all of a sudden you can see the education level of your customers increasing, and that's what you want. You want an educated customer base.
Yes.
Because then when the sales guy, from whatever company comes and knocks on your door and says, "Oh, you see a spider? I see that spider. Oh, our company actually gets rid of spiders," or whatever crap they say, right?
Yeah.
Then your educated customer says, "Well, actually, then what do they say?" They say, "Well, actually, what I understand is that pest control is a process, not an event, and my company was just out here last month, and what I understand is that putting down more spray doesn't make the bugs more dead. And also, I love my company because they send out quarterly emails and they dance in the parade and whatever,
And they're awesome.
And they're awesome. And they have this podcast that or whatever, not that. But, having an educated customer base is so important. But using buzz phrases, it makes that information stick.
Yes. And it makes it stick for the customers and your staff, right? Like you were just saying.
Yep.
Pest control is a process, not an event. Another one, situations like, hey, Mother Nature can be really difficult to control.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
We're not just battling some arbitrary little robots here, right?
Yep.
We're talking about ants and earwigs and spiders and all sorts of other things that have been around a lot longer than we have.
Yep.
And will probably be around a lot longer than we will, right?
Yeah.
Thousands, millennia of evolution, and they're smart, man.
Yeah.
They know what's going on, right?
Yep.
And we have science on our side, but again, summing all that down into one little buzz phrase, right?
Yeah.
Mother Nature is difficult to control.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes.
Yeah. Or the other one I like is Mother Nature provides an endless supply of these things.
Yes. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Right. Another one that I love is, your home is a magnet for pest activity,
yeah,
right? It's
yeah.
climate controlled, protected from natural predators, and has plenty of access to food and water, right? So just providing these buzzwords to your staff allows them to disseminate that information to your customers. And just like you said, you increase the education level of the customer, you increase the education level of the technician, of the staff, of the office person answering the phone. And before you know it, you are reducing your reservices, right? You're reducing your cancellations, especially from competitive offers from door-to-door guys.
Yep.
You're increasing your profits, right? I mean, I don't want to say that it's a completely linear path of benefit here, but that will come to you.
But it's one of those things that it's a game of inches, right? So every little thing that you add to your service offering or to your customer communication, it gains that little bit by bit, you know. And if you're in the habit of sending out regular customer communication, that's a great way to disseminate that information, because what you don't, well, I would say, the more avenues of education that you have with your customer, the better. So your CSRs, that's like front line, right? Your service team, that's second line. But let's reinforce all of that communication and all that information by sending out a monthly or a bi-monthly or a quarterly email.
Yep.
And you can use mail services that show you open rates and read rates.
You got MailChimp and all sorts of other stuff.
When we're not getting paid to say those names, wink, wink, MailChimp. But you send out consistent customer information or information to your customers, and all of a sudden, just like inch by inch, you start building this educated customer base that is following your narrative.
Yes.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. And, you take it a step further. I think a lot of PCOs want to get involved with social media, right? Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. And a lot of times they're thinking, okay, so on these social media platforms, what I need to be doing is advertising, right? Hey, here's my special. Here's this dead bug here. Check it out. We just trapped this rat, or whatever the situation is. But you're missing out on a huge portion, because sometimes a lot of your followers are your existing customer base, right?
Yeah.
So they don't necessarily need to see advertisements or specials, but they could see educational content, which not only allows you to, train them and teach them about your narrative, but it also allows you to identify yourself as an industry expert,
Right, yeah.
right? Especially if you're an associate certified entomologist, or you have some kind of technical training, or you have specialized licensing for your market.
Yep.
Anything like that, you can create content that allows you to educate your customers and highlights you and your staff as the experts in the field, right? The experts, the professionals.
Yeah, short form media is really, really great because it's entertaining. So it's memorable, and it's on a platform that everybody is on anyway. I mean, you get the screen time notification. Your screen time was 19 hours, say, and you're like, what the cuss? How was I on my phone for 9? And then you realize, oh, well, it's because I keep my alarm clock app open at night or whatever, right? But people, I mean, I think that in 100 years. I think that we're going to evolve these massive right thumbs, right? From scrolling continuously. So, yeah, I mean, short form media is a great way to educate your customers. I remember, what was this, a month ago, a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, we just made this little clip. And it was me standing outside my house, and I was talking about rodents. And I said, if you see these little golf ball sized holes near the foundation of your house, and it looks like they're going towards the foundation, you probably have Norway rats, right? And so it was like this 45-second long clip we put on Instagram and Facebook, and it blew me away how many views it got, and like how many shares, and our social media people and Jana were like, wow, this is getting a lot of traffic, and in my mind I'm like, why? What? Why do people care about this? Because my Instagram, it's just motorcycles, conspiracy theories, and like and how to make money, right?
Yeah.
You know, but people, for some reason, people, they really care about that, and it gets shared.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and obviously people want to be entertained on social media. That's a given. But I think that people do want to be educated,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yep.
sometimes I'll find myself in some weird black hole of learning how to do baked goods, apply icing to cakes. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. You get
like
sucked down that rabbit
I do
hole.
get sucked down that
Yeah,
rabbit hole. There's
yeah.
a guy on there, and again, not endorsed to say this, but there's a guy in there that like does the really crazy
Is it the
elaborate
chocolate?
cakes. It's the chocolate guy.
The chocolate guy.
Yeah,
and
what
he's
is
always
that?
got that same smile on his face.
Yeah, it's the chocolate guy. You guys have seen the chocolate guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm like watching this and I'm thinking like, this is freaking amazing.
You make
you
like
know?
a 10-foot tall dragon out of chocolate.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
just any kind of baking show where if somebody popped on a video and was like, listen, I'm going to show you how to make ramen noodles. I know how to make ramen noodles, but I can't not watch this person who's an expert on
Right.
ramen noodles, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting thing that, if you guys are making, if you have social media presence, right? You should if you don't already. But don't get too caught up in the advertising side of it,
Yeah.
right? Jump into the educational side of it and make the educational side of it fun, right? So you get both the entertainment and the education, put that together, and you have people that want to engage with your content, which could be pretty cool.
Yeah, and I think of what Matt Rogers has talked about. We've sat with Matt Rogers, and we had dinner with him one time, and he was talking about how his dad, who was, oh my gosh, what pest control company did Matt Rogers' dad?
Killingsworth.
Killingsworth, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Killingsworth. So, he talked about how his dad, they did these ads. It had nothing to do with pests. They didn't show bugs. It had nothing to do with anything like that. And I think that maybe these were TV commercials back in the day, or maybe it was Facebook, but I think it was TV commercials. It had nothing to do with bugs, had nothing to do with pest control. It had everything to do with the family vibe.
Yes.
Right? Killingsworth is the family vibe. It shows Matt's dad with his grandkids, and they're having this conversation about values, and he said that commercial like exploded, and so it's not about bugs. Maybe people care about that, but you got to touch the nerve that people care about.
Yes.
Safety, security, humor, family, like all of these touch points that people actually care about. And that's how you gain interest.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, we've talked about this a lot before in customer service, right? People will forget what you say, but they won't forget how you made them feel.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And in social media, they only have short form media. We're talking 15, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, maybe a
Right.
little bit longer.
Yeah.
And
If someone has a really long attention
yeah,
span.
exactly. And they're going to forget exactly what you said, right? They might even forget exactly kind of what the video was about. But if you have your brand represented there, right? And that media allows them to feel a certain way, whether it's educated or that's confidence or they trust your brand. They get that nice warm feeling where it's like, oh, if I have a pest issue, that's the company I think I want to use, right?
Yep.
And they're not really thinking it, but they're feeling it.
Yep.
So if your media can elicit that type of response and they can remember that feeling with your brand,
Right.
then the next time that they Google, pest control service near me, they see your brand pop up and they go, oh, like I remember.
Yep.
And even if they don't remember the specific video, they remember the feeling. And it's at least enough of a subconscious idea that that's the person they click on.
Yeah, and the longer that they spend looking at your ad, the more of your ads show up on their feed.
Yes. That's
Because
true.
I said the word zero turn riding lawnmower out loud to my wife. And I swear the next time I opened up Instagram, it was like motorcycle conspiracy theory post, riding mower. It's like every other thing was like riding, like zero turn riding mowers. And I was like, man, I'm so glad Big Brother is listening to me so they can push all these ads on me. So the longer people spend looking at your ad, also or your post, the more of your post they're going to see. Let's
Yeah, I know we've kind of
we went down a rabbit
we
hole.
did go, we went down a social media rabbit hole, which
Yeah.
is really ironic if you kind of think about it that way.
You're right. Yeah.
One thing that I wanted to touch on when it comes to these reservices, right? Kind of managing
Thanks for
customer
bringing us back,
expectations,
Eric.
right?
Yeah.
All the way full circle here. What's really important is that if you're going to go out and do a reservice, right? We already talked about the fact that you're battling against Mother Nature.
Right.
Sometimes customers are going to have, just regular activity. It's normal, it's typical. But we are going to run into situations where we have a reservice because something was missed, right?
Yep.
Or because maybe we didn't have the information at the time. We go out for a reservice for a customer who the initial service was for ants. Now they have spiders, right? Or whatever the situation
Yep.
is.
Or they have a wasp nest that developed in the last 5 days. Same thing.
So it's really important that one, when the technician goes out there, that if there is new information, that we notate that, right?
Correct.
We document the new information that we have so that this customer can be taken care of the best in the future. And we also want to document if this customer has specific and particular wants, interests, and needs, right? Those
Right.
wins that we've talked
The
about
wins.
before.
Yep.
Because sometimes these customers, what they want and what could contribute to reservices has less to do with pest activity and just more to do with their own personal preference of what that threshold for pest activity is.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah. And you mentioned at the very beginning the word triage. And so I like the word triage because, first of all, it's French, and I don't even know what it means, but I know what it means, So you're kind of, in a way, you're triaging your reservices. And if you've got a good CSR team that's trained, which, Eric has done a phenomenal job of hitting all the training points with our CSRs. So our CSRs can see right off the bat a triage from a triage perspective. Who's the most important customer to get reserviced? Are we talking about a customer who is really upset, who has a real pressing problem? Are we talking about a customer that said, you know what, this other guy came and knocked on my door, tried to sell me pest control. He pointed out a couple of wasp nests that you guys missed last time. These are your high priority. These are your high priority customers, right? And
Yes.
triage, I think that's yellow if you're using the tag system, right? And then you have your walking wounded, okay? Your walking wounded, which are the green. Maybe it's been a long time since we've done triage, but if your walking wounded are the people that say, oh yeah, I saw a couple of ants. And, we had these little round roly-poly things coming in through the back door. Whenever you guys get to it,
Yeah.
And you get a lot of those calls, So it's like, all right, cool. Well, let's see when we can fit you in. Sometime within the next week. Okay, sure. That sounds great. So you plug them in somewhere that it makes sense. So in a way, triaging your callbacks is really a matter of just obviously finding the highest priority, making them a priority, and then, delaying everybody else. But I think the question that we were trying to answer is how do you fit those in during the peak months where your guys are already pushed, they're already, feeling a little strained. I think that the weather plays a less of a factor in that for us here, where, we'll hit triple digits for like 3 days mid-August. Otherwise, it's like 80 degrees all summer long.
Yeah.
Versus a pest control company in Scottsdale.
Yep.
Where right now it's 160 degrees and it's only going to get hotter. People are baking on the streets in August. So, those things all play a factor in what your technician capacity is.
Yes. Yeah. And, when you think about it, pest control is not an easy job, right? We're talking attics, crawl spaces, carrying around a backpack, sweeping down cobwebs, house after house after house after house, right?
Yep.
And, when it's a little bit too cold, it's not too bad. You can bundle up, right? But when it's hot, right? When it's 90, 95 degrees, and you're doing all that work, it's exhausting.
It is.
Right? And the tough part is that as a business owner, you're trying to staff appropriately based on the season. And pest control is one of those businesses that has a phased demand model, right?
Correct, yeah. Bell curve.
Yep, goes up with the insect activity, comes back down as the season kind of cools off. And we would all love it if we could just pick up high quality guys in the summertime and say, great, you're only going to work for 4 or 5 months, and then just let them go and then have them come right back again the next spring.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't work that way,
No,
right? So on one hand, you could write it out, right? You're like, okay, like how do my guys probably want overtime, right? Like, let's just go,
Yeah.
until you realize that, one guy calls out sick, one guy you have to let go because he's a total liability maybe.
Right.
And then you're down 2 technicians, 2 routes, and you're working your other technicians to death, right? And then, they're not only doing regular stops, but they also have initials for new customers coming in.
Correct. Yep.
And they've got these reservices we're talking about. So I feel like if you're trying to be prepared, the better option is to hire and possibly be overhired, right? Like solve the problem now, which is staffing appropriately for the summer.
Right.
And then worrying about the possible overstaffing issue as things cool off.
Yeah, and another thing that you can do, if you've been in business for a handful of years and you keep stats, you can plan for that. And this is what we do. We forecast what the needs of the business are going to be on the service side, and on our CSR side, based on previous years' performance. We forecast that out and we say, okay, well, we anticipate that we're going to need this many technicians, this many CSRs, et cetera, et cetera. So you hire for those. It's an element of faith, right?
Yes.
You plant the seed because you believe that it's going to grow. So when you forecast out and you hire to that capacity, then you're putting yourself in a good spot. And I think on the other side of that too, like you said, pushing technicians overtime and things like that. I think it's a good practice to communicate with your technicians. Hey, we're going to have some overtime hours this next week or for the next month. Are there any volunteers for overtime hours? That way the people that you're overloading are the people that have said, oh yeah, no, I need that. I need the hours. So burnout is a real thing, and if you just push everybody, then you can have people that get burnt out and they complain. But if it's a volunteer thing, then you're mitigating that burnout.
Yeah, and it's and from a technical pesticide point of things, right? We're familiar with acute versus chronic, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like you can have a technician who has acute burnout, right? It's like, hey, this 1 week he works 55, 60 hours, and he's like, dude, I need a break, But you can also have like that chronic burnout, where it's like, over the course of these few months, this technician is working constantly over and over and over and over and overtime, right? And maybe as a business owner, you're thinking, well, I'm paying him time and a half, like he's getting actually really good money and that's great. And he doesn't say anything because he doesn't want to whine, doesn't want to complain, right? But eventually, he's going to break in one way or another. And just at that point, just giving him like, oh, well, do you need a couple days off? I'm sorry, man, that's not going to fix the chronic burnout that he has now developed. So having the conversation that you're talking about is so useful because some of these guys want that overtime, right? Some of these guys need the extra money and they have a purpose. So when they're out there grinding and working 50 hours a week, they're like, this is my choice. This is what I wanted to do.
Right.
Right. And it allows you to put the needs of the business and align the wants of the employees, which is a beautiful thing. Right. And I think it's also important just to communicate. And you touched on this a little bit. You did a really great job this spring of kind of talking to our technicians. And I think you do this pretty regularly almost every single year, right? It's that the season's coming up talk, right? It's that conversation where like, hey guys, like it's April, like here's what you need to expect. And, because you come off of this season for us anyway, where it's fall and winter, where like, you have less stops per day, low reservice rates, customers are a little bit more forgiving. And then you get into this season that all of a sudden has this huge upswing, right? And you kind of have to remind them, especially some of the new guys, because some of these new guys got hired on in February, March, right? They have no idea. But you kind of have to remind them, hey, pest control is hard work, right? You're going to have some long hours. We're going to work to see if we can get some volunteers, like you said. But either way, as a team, we have to be able to come together, support each other, and just know that there are going to be long, hot days. Sometimes reservices or notes aren't going to make sense.
Right.
Sometimes you're going to have disagreements between what the office thinks and what you think.
Yeah.
All these other things. But ultimately, I guess when it comes down to it, the best thing other than communication is making sure that you have proper staffing.
Oh, totally. And, speaking of proper staffing, anybody that's been running their company for a certain amount of time and has a certain amount of experience with employees, there is always, especially when you get to a certain size, technicians and office staff, you get to a certain size and you realize that churn is a real thing.
Yes.
Yep. There's going to be attrition in the ranks of your technicians and your CSRs. So if your summer season is April, May, June, July, August, right? Or even into September, that's how many months is that? April, May, June, July, August, September. 6 months, right? So in 6 months, what are the odds that you're going to lose one of the technicians? Right.
Yeah.
And so if you overhire, let's put that in quotations, if you overhire, then you're preparing for the growth that you're anticipating based on your projections for that summer, but you're also anticipating for the inevitable churn when one guy just doesn't show up, right? Or you hire a new guy. And we had this recently. It was weird. We hired a new guy. He showed up for training. He went all the way through training. We turned a vehicle over to him, and then the dude just freaking ghosted us. He just disappeared.
Yeah.
And he left the vehicle, whatever it is, fully equipped, $40,000 vehicle, just sitting at his house, and we're all scratching our heads, going, "Who the cuss is this guy that just went through training and then just disappeared?"
Dude.
And so that kind of thing is gonna happen. So over hiring, you can put it in quotation marks because it's going to depend on what you consider to be over hiring and what your churn rate is.
Yes, and obviously you are factoring in the probability that the asset you're trying to manage is like humans.
It's a human
right?
asset.
Yeah. These are people, right?
Yep.
It's you can't look at a car and say, okay, well, what are the odds that thing's going to break down in X amount of miles, right? A human being is completely different than that, right? So you have to add in some padding to make sure that you still have what you need, so that all the other humans that you manage don't start breaking down, right?
Yep.
So it's this really unique kind of philosophy that you have to get into, and the bigger that you get, like you said, the more you have to keep an eye on knowing that you're going to have churn. You're going to have weird stuff that happens.
Yeah.
You're going to have people that want vacations. You're going to have people who get sick.
Well, you're going to have a guy that you want to fire because he's a cancer on the team.
Yeah, and you have to let them go. Like we've talked about that before, where your staffing is so tight that you have a legitimate liability on the team, but you can't fire him because it would be worse than just leaving him there. Like, how horrible is that, right? So, and I know that there's probably some guys listening and they're thinking, okay, Eric and Jake, that's really cool, like overhire, assuming that you're going to really narrow it down to the people that you need. But what if you overhire and you legitimately are overstaffed and none of those other things happen? What do I do with those people? And we were talking about this yesterday because our service manager actually brought this exact thing to our desk and said, listen, we are overstaffed. What should we do, right? And we talked about providing opportunities for technicians to get additional licensing, right? To study for their ACE, and to do other types of activities that the business still feels valuable.
Right.
Training, teaching, anything else and you can kind of move those assets around, right? But the point that I'm trying to make here is broaden your perspective on what you're willing to pay for and what things could contribute to the success of your business other than just running route.
Right.
Right. So this has been a jam-packed episode of stuff that we actually were planning on it being like 30 minutes long.
We're like, it should just be a 30-minute episode.
Lo and behold, it's 45 minutes later and we got that anyway.
Yeah.
But
we hope you've enjoyed listening to us talk for 45 minutes.
So, but the important thing is if you have any questions or you have any concerns about staffing, reach out on the Facebook group.
Oh, totally.
We've got a whole community out there who wants to help you guys build and scale and grow. And a lot of these guys have been there before.
Yep.
It's like, hey, how do we handle this particular problem? And a lot of these guys are willing to help even if you're in the same particular market, which is really amazing.
Yep.
So
when you put together the combined total of 4,300 plus PCOs.
That's huge.
Their businesses range from single owner operator all the way up to tens of millions of dollars in revenue, and they've got 100 employees or whatever. There is a wealth of knowledge in the Bug Bucks community, and for those listening, we encourage you to be active on the Facebook group.
Yeah,
because there are people that have questions, that are looking for answers, and it's just super helpful.
Yeah, and it's not like the Facebook group costs you anything. It's free.
Yeah.
So go hang out, connect with people, share information, get information. And of course, if you have questions that you want discussed here on the podcast, we love to see those. We'd be happy to take your question, drop it in here, discuss it, talk about it, break it down, get you some answers, and we'll kind of go from there.
Totally.
So, well, dude, this has been awesome. Of course, for everybody listening, we appreciate you guys taking the time to drop in. If you have a coworker, a manager, or an owner who could benefit from listening to this episode, the best way to say thank you to us is to share this episode with them. If you haven't joined the Facebook group yet, go find the group and join. It's Bug Bucks Plus, lots of information and great connections there. And if you have a topic you want discussed on the show, drop it in the group. As always, this episode is brought to you by Bug Bucks Plus, the #1 training and education platform designed to help you build and scale your pest control company. Visit bugbucksplus.com to sign up and start building today. Thanks again for listening in, and until next time, keep building those pest control companies.
Don't forget to subscribe.
And subscribe.
You're listening to the Bug Bucks Podcast, hosted by Eric Bassett and Jake Klaus.